Hey guys, tonight we're sneaking past the velvet curtains and creaking castle doors to enter a place very few ever saw, unless you were nobility or, a candle holder who swore not to peek. We're talking about the royal bedchamber in the Middle Ages. It's not just a room, it's a whole world behind thick walls, perfumed silks, and silence guarded like a treasure. You're not just imagining it. You're there. You smell the beeswax candles and the faint sting of wood smoke. You hear your own boots echo softly on cold flagstone as you approach the heavy oak door. You push gently. It groans open, and in that moment, you realize something very important. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where and when you're listening from, your city and the local time. I love seeing just how far across time zones these medieval dreams travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step across the threshold. The castle's outer chill gives way to a strange warmth, not from heating, there isn't any modern kind, but from layers. Layers of tapestries, rugs and furniture packed close to hold in what little heat the hearth can offer. The royal bedroom is surprisingly dim. Only a few tall candles flicker from iron holders, casting long shadows that shift and sway like silent courtiers. The air smells old and expensive. Incense, rosewater, sweat, damp stone. There's a smoky scent of juniper logs from the fireplace, and perhaps just the faintest note of... Yes, that's probably lavender oil spilled on the sheets earlier by a clumsy servant. This is where the king sleeps. Not where he rules, not where he eats, where he lies still and vulnerable. And unlike your room back home, this space is never truly empty. Even at midnight, you're not alone. At the center of it all is the bed. It dominates the room like a throne lying down. Gigantic, more stage than furniture. Raised nearly 3 feet off the floor on a carved wooden platform. The mattress is stuffed with feathers, but uneven and loud when you press on it. Every time the king moves, it groans back at him like an old friend. Surrounding it, rich fabrics, layers of crimson and gold, a canopy above thick enough to block sunlight, and prying eyes. It's not just for sleep. It's a symbol. This is the royal body's resting place. It is sanctified by politics and ceremony. You don't just nap here, you retire like a deity. But don't imagine peace and quiet. Even in slumber, the king is a target. The doors to the room are barred at night. Not just closed, barred from the inside with a massive wooden beam that takes 2 men to lift. Guards stand just outside. And still, there's a man sleeping in the corner, pretending not to watch, ready to spring up at the faintest sound. That's how tight security is. Funny, right? You'd think being king would mean sleeping in silence and safety. But no. It's more like a hotel with terrible soundproofing, overstaffed by people who might be trying to kill you. Still, this room is where secrets happen. It's where foreign emissaries are sometimes smuggled in for whispered negotiations. It's where scribes bring letters in the wee hours. It's where the king makes declarations to nobody, just to the walls, and where lovers creep in with bare feet and darting glances. Let's not forget that this bedroom isn't for just one purpose. It's a status chamber. Many royal bedrooms were part of a larger set of rooms, the chambre du roi, divided by curtains or movable walls. This is the innermost part, the sanctum. Think of it like a VIP lounge with very bad plumbing, and you'd be surprised what kinds of people were allowed in. During the day, certain nobles or officials might attend the king during his lever, his official waking and dressing. That means you could be snoring one minute and the next. Surprise, a circle of well-dressed strangers watching you yawn. No pressure. There's also a constant problem. Cold, even with all the fabric, a roaring hearth, and the best architecture of the 13th century, which isn't saying much. Castles are cold. The stone walls sweat. The wind finds every gap. Some kings even slept with small dogs under the covers. Not for love, but for warmth. So yes, even royalty needed hot water bottles. Except their version was a little dog. You notice a chest by the bed. Inside, spare linens. Maybe a dagger. Definitely a book of psalms. Some kings liked to read scripture before bed. Others just clutched a relic or two. A saint's tooth, a holy thorn. Or, if they were feeling daring, a tiny bottle of blessed wine, just in case. Because sleep wasn't just rest. It was spiritual, dangerous even. To sleep was to let your soul drift. And what if it didn't return? That's why many kings had elaborate sleep prayers, whole rituals. Some even confessed before sleeping, just in case they didn't wake up. A royal goodnight was half bedtime routine, half last rites. Meanwhile, outside the thick walls, life bustled. The castle never truly slept. Servants cleaned hallways, horses shifted in the stables, guards paced the battlements. Someone always had to be awake, so the king could sleep. Historians still debate how often kings actually used their royal beds. Some records suggest they often chose side rooms or even camp beds for convenience or safety. Others argue that the grandeur of the royal bedroom was too important to abandon. It was as much about being seen as about being rested. You feel it, don't you? That mix of luxury and discomfort. You're lying in the finest bed in the land, but with a dagger under your pillow, a chamberlain outside the curtain, and the constant creak of the stone settling beneath you. This isn't sleep. This is surveillance under satin. And yet, there's something soothing about it. The flicker of firelight, the faint rustle of tapestries, the heavy warmth of velvet covers. You sink deeper into the mattress. You let the day slip away. Tomorrow you will wake as king. But tonight, you simply try to sleep. You blink awake, just barely. The room hasn't changed. The candles burn lower. The fire has settled into embers. Somewhere, a log pops sharply, like a far-off footstep. You stay still. You're a king, after all. Let them come to you. But tonight, your curiosity stirs. You want to know, what exactly are you sleeping on? Let's talk about the royal bed itself. Not just its size or the covers, but its guts, what it's made of, why it mattered, and how every single element sent a message. This person is powerful, wealthy, and deeply uncomfortable, because ironically the bed's made for kings, often more about display than comfort. Let's peel it back layer by layer. The base, usually a solid wooden frame, oak, ash, or walnut, ornately carved with religious motifs or heraldic animals. Some are so heavy they require 6 people to move. You're not just setting up the bed, you're staging a monument. Above that, a lattice of ropes or leather straps holds up the mattress. These get loosened or tightened regularly, hence the phrase, sleep tight. And if the servants forget to tighten them, you sink, you sag, you start dreaming in a hammock. Now, the mattress. Most likely linen or canvas, filled with goose down if you're lucky, or horsehair if the treasury's tight. Either way, it's heavy, lumpy, and in constant need of fluffing. Over time, the feathers shift like tectonic plates. One corner becomes Mount Pillow, the other, the Mariana Trench. Then come the sheets. The finest kings slept on imported silk from Byzantium or damask from Italy. These aren't the soft 800 thread count luxury sheets you're picturing. These are crisp, cool, and slightly scratchy, unless washed with ash soap for days. Also, most sheets weren't white. They were dyed rich colors: purple, crimson, royal blue, not just for beauty, but to hide the grime that inevitably crept in. On top, layer upon layer of blankets, wool fur-lined, embroidered, some edged with gold thread. One chronicler described King Philip IV's bedding as enough to smother a man if laid improperly. You'd laugh until you realize it's not a joke. And then there's the canopy. Oh, the canopy. A full enveloping structure above and around the bed, supported by towering posts and hung with curtains on every side. This isn't just decoration. It traps heat, blocks drafts, and, most importantly, blocks eyes. Because kings did not sleep in locked solitude, they often shared the room with guards, scribes, or favored companions. These curtains are privacy, and their power. Drawing them shut is like closing the gates of a fortress. And you lie inside, sweating under layers, listening to every shift outside the fabric like a medieval ASMR session. The scrape of boot soles, the sniff of a bored servant, the dry cough of someone who's been standing in one place for 3 hours. You shift slightly. The bed creaks, a low groan that makes the entire canopy frame tremble. Somewhere out there, someone heard that. Someone always hears, which is why beds often had a speaking end. Yes, that's a real thing. The head of the bed, nearest the wall or a special side table, where the king could give low-voiced orders to a nearby servant without rising or being seen. Imagine Siri, but in human form, holding a candle and waiting all night to be summoned. What's that? You're cold? Time to call for the bed servant. Not just someone to tuck you in, mind you. This person maintains the bed like a set piece. They rotate the mattress regularly, beat the dust from the curtains, and, crucially, warm the sheets before the king lies down. How? With bed warmers, iron pans filled with hot coals, slid between the sheets before bedtime to chase away the castle chill. Problem is, leave it too long and you scorch the linen. Not long enough and you're climbing into a royal meat locker. There's a reason kings wore nightcaps. And while we're here, let's discuss royal sleepwear. You imagine silken robes, maybe a tasteful monogram. But in truth, nightwear was surprisingly practical. Long tunics, often indistinguishable from day wear, belted loosely, with socks or slippers waiting beside the bed. Some kings kept a small sword within reach, or at least a dagger, because nothing says sweet dreams like sleeping next to a murder weapon. Oh, and yes, the crown stays off, usually. But there are portraits suggesting certain kings, Henry VIII among them, had their crowns nearby even while dozing. Pure symbolism. Maybe. Or maybe it was a way of reminding everyone who was still boss, even when unconscious. And speaking of appearances, every element of this bed is curated, because even while sleeping, kings were being watched. Not always directly, but through reputation. When foreign envoys visited, they might be granted a glimpse of the royal chambers. What they saw would be carried home as gossip, diplomacy, or both. So if your pillows looked limp or your sheets were poorly embroidered, it wasn't just poor taste, it was poor politics. The royal bed was also used for audiences. No, seriously, a king might conduct early morning business propped up against silk cushions, wearing his nightgown and issuing decrees before he even stood up. It was called the petit lever, the little rising, and it made the bed as much a throne as the actual throne. And yes, historians still argue about how often this happened. Some claim it was ceremonial. Others insist it was a daily occurrence. But one thing's certain. The bed was never just for sleep. It was a political instrument, a place of alliances, betrayals, sickness, seduction, dreams, and death. A kind of stage with curtains that opened and closed, not just to signal night and day, but power and vulnerability. You adjust your body slightly, finding that sweet spot where the mattress doesn't tilt you into the edge. You notice something carved into the bedpost. Latin, a prayer. Something about keeping the soul safe while the body lies still. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you're no longer in a castle. You're floating, cushioned by feathers and politics, a king among shadows. Outside, the candles sputter one by one. Inside the canopy, sleep approaches like a cautious ally. Your kingdom dreams without you, just for a little while. You stir just before dawn, not because you're fully rested, far from it, but because the sound of soft-soled footsteps brushes the stone floor, steady as a drum beat. You don't open your eyes, you don't speak. You're not supposed to, because now it's time for the entourage. Being a king in the Middle Ages means never being alone, not even in sleep, and certainly not when you're about to wake. The people entering your chamber aren't invaders. They're invited. This is the ritual. Let's break it down. First comes the gentle knock, symbolic more than necessary. Everyone inside already knows they're coming. It's dawn, or close enough. The sun hasn't even peeked through the castle slits, but the king's day starts early. A servant enters with a small hand bell, tingling once, twice, the signal. Behind him, a procession forms. A page with fresh water, a valet with linens, a confessor, a court physician, and sometimes even members of the royal council. They wait near the door, hands clasped, eyes respectfully lowered. You, still tangled in sheets, are the only person horizontal. What a bizarre way to start the day, still lying down, surrounded by silent people pretending not to see your drool. This, my friend, is the royal lever. It's not just a wake-up call, it's a performance. You're expected to stretch a little, gracefully, of course. Rub your eyes and allow the servants to pull open the heavy bed curtains like a stage reveal. Boom, there you are. Sleep rumpled and divine. Some kings took this moment to greet their courtiers with charm. Others stared them down silently for 30 seconds just to assert dominance. Either way, you're on, and the show doesn't stop. A servant brings a damp cloth, infused with rose water or vinegar, to wipe your face and hands. Another offers a robe, lined with fur naturally, and a third fetches slippers warmed by the hearth. Remember that thing where you wake up and stumble around for coffee in your underwear? Yeah, medieval royalty didn't get that luxury. Instead, you're expected to glide from bed like you've just emerged from a cloud. A living saint, a monarch touched by God. Of course, you might still be sore. The giant feather mattress has left your spine in the shape of a question mark. One foot might be numb, and you absolutely need to pee, but you smile faintly. Nod once. The routine continues. Now enter the night crew, those who watched over you while you slept. The bed servant, the night guard, and sometimes the court astrologer, who claims to have observed no omens overnight. Which is good, because you definitely don't need an omen before breakfast. One might whisper a brief report. No disturbances, Your Grace. The wind from the west abated after midnight, The bells tolled once, but no fire was seen. Translation: the castle is still standing. Nobody tried to murder you. Congrats. This is also the time for updates from across the realm, delivered while you're still in bed. Sometimes in French, sometimes in Latin, occasionally in rhyming verse if the messenger's feeling creative. You can see how sleep becomes strategic. Your chamber is no refuge. It's a nerve center, a command post disguised as a boudoir. The moment you're half awake, you're issuing orders, approving decrees, maybe even granting mercy to a prisoner 3 counties away. Talk about multitasking, and while you're sorting through statecraft in your nightshirt, the physician approaches. He gently lifts your wrist, takes your pulse, or tries. Nobody really understands it yet. Sniffs your breath. Maybe even listens to your stomach with his ear. Yes, his ear. It's not medicine. It's medieval medicine. And if you think this sounds absurd, remember, some kings took it further. Louis XIV of France, bit later, yes, conducted his entire court's morning ritual from bed. Dozens of nobles attended his grand lever, each jostling for the right to help him put on a sock. While our focus is earlier in the medieval period, echoes of this obsession with waking ceremony were already taking root. Even sleep had a hierarchy. Not everyone got this treatment. If you're a minor noble, you probably wake alone, cold in a shared room with a barking hound. But you're a king. Your sleep is considered national security. Now back to your reality. The chamberlain speaks softly. "Shall I draw the drapes, Your Majesty?" You nod. The massive tapestries are pulled aside. Grey morning light bleeds into the room, washing over furniture like a tweed. You glimpse the view from your window, mist curling across the courtyard. Banners limp in the still air, but you're not quite ready to leave this soft, claustrophobic throne of feathers. So what happens next? Breakfast. Yes? In bed. A servant sets tray on a stand beside you. Bread, cheese, maybe a bit of smoked meat or warm broth. If you're feeling luxurious, perhaps a candied fig or early strawberries from the garden. All served on pewter or, if you're especially spoiled, silver. You eat in silence, or maybe share a few sleepy quips with the steward. Tell the bishop his letter bored me back to sleep. Remind me, why are we at war with Burgundy again? Laughter is muffled, polite. Everyone pretends not to notice you dropped a crumb into your lap. And finally, someone asks, "Would Your Majesty wish to rise?" As if you have any real choice. The day waits. Audiences, judgments, hunting, petitions, disputes between barons, maybe a sword demonstration if time allows. But for now, you close your eyes again. Just for one more minute. You think about how strange it is. How sleep, this private act, is never truly yours. Not when you're king. Your dreams are not sacred. Your snoring is not anonymous. Every inch of your rest is public performance. Historians still debate how much privacy medieval monarchs truly had. Some argue kings had secret escape rooms, side beds, or hidden chambers for genuine rest. Others suggest the entire point was visibility, to be observed, even in sleep, as proof of divine appointment. Whatever the truth, you shift once more beneath the covers. A knock on the outer door. More people arriving. Another audience. Another choice to make. Another moment of theater. But you're still beneath the canopy, still shrouded in shadow and warmth. Just a king, trying to finish a dream. It's later now. You've finally risen. The bed, that gilded cage of feathers and ritual, stands behind you like a stage after the curtain falls. Your robes are on. The council is waiting, but not all royal duties involve thrones or treaties. Tonight, we return not to matters of the mind or the sword, but the body. Because despite the silks, incense, and whispering attendants, there's a truth too earthy to ignore. Palaces are cold, and no one was colder than a sleeping king in a medieval castle. You might imagine castles as warm sanctuaries, a fire in every room, a cozy refuge from howling winds. You'd be wrong, so very wrong. Castles are stone. Stone is cold. Stone doesn't insulate. It radiates damp like a giant, miserable sponge. No matter how thick the walls or fancy the tapestries, a January night in a Scottish keep or French fortress is the same, unforgiving. So let's talk about how kings tried to keep warm, and how it didn't always work. First, let's be clear. You're lucky to have a fire at all. Most royal bedrooms included a hearth, yes. But that didn't mean it burned all night. Firewood was expensive, and if no one stoked it, it would die down by midnight. The embers glow faintly in the corner, doing their best against a room the size of a cathedral. So you start layering. You're already wearing your long linen nightshirt. Over that, a heavy wool robe. Maybe a velvet outer tunic with a fur collar. Socks of coarse yarn. Felt-lined slippers. And if you're especially chilly, you pile another blanket on top. Sometimes made from ermine, sometimes bare fur, sometimes just very determined sheep. And still, your breath fogs in the air, your nose tingles. The tip of your ear is considering rebellion. Time to bring in the heat. Enter the warming pan, a round metal vessel filled with hot coals, slid between the sheets before you climb in. It warms the linen, the mattress, maybe even your spirits, but leave it too long and your sheets scorch. Pull it out too soon and the bed's still a slab of ice. Some kings took no chances. They had their bed warmed twice, once before the public bedtime and once after the servants left for actual sleeping, like heating up a pizza in the plate. But fire and fabric only go so far. So what's the final frontier in medieval climate control? Other humans. That's right. You don't sleep alone. No, not in the scandalous sense. Though we'll get there. We mean the body heat method. Royalty often slept with trusted companions, not romantically, but practically. It was called co-sleeping, a totally normal and wildly awkward part of court life. You might share a bed with a valet, a squire, or even another noble. You didn't cuddle, you just endured. The logic? One human furnace warms another. A good way to survive the kind of draft that freezes your eyebrows in your sleep. Of course, this leads to some strange memories. There are documented letters of nobles recalling which king kicked, snored, or emitted royal winds under the covers. That's right, your flatulence becomes political data. Still feeling majestic? Let's add another layer, quite literally. Your bed curtains aren't just for privacy. They trap heat like a tent. You close all four sides, creating a fabric cocoon. The air inside becomes warmer and stale. There's a reason some courtiers compared royal beds to coffins. But at least you're warm. Mostly, unless the wind changes. A good medieval castle has murder holes, arrow slits, and secret passages. But it does not have insulation. If the wind shifts direction, it finds every crack. Suddenly, your cozy bubble becomes a cold cavern. The curtain flaps. The candles flicker. You wonder if someone left a door open. Or worse, if someone entered who shouldn't have. Because sometimes cold air doesn't mean nature. Sometimes it means treachery. Let's pause here. Because here's a little-known fact. Some kings preferred the cold. They believed a brisk chamber strengthened the constitution. One chronicler claimed that sleeping in a drafty room hardened the soul against temptation. Temptation, in this case, meant warmth, comfort, and women. Yes, cold was seen as morally superior. Monks took this to extremes, some sleeping with no heat at all. But even kings flirted with this ascetic idea, a sort of performative suffering, as if frostbite meant holiness. Historians still debate this. Did kings really enjoy the cold? Or did they just pretend to? Because looking tough beats looking like you're shivering in ermine. Some say King Edward III bragged about sleeping without fire in winter. Others claim he had foot warmers under the bed and lied through his chattering teeth. Now back to you. You're lying beneath 8 layers of linen, wool, and fur. You've got a warming pan, 2 dogs, maybe a valet snoring gently on the other side of the bed. And still, your toes are cold. You consider getting up to throw more logs on the fire, but it's dark. The floor's freezing. Your chamberlain will scold you for stepping on the rushes in bare feet. So instead, you sigh. You whisper a brief prayer to Saint Olaf, the patron of warmth, or so you like to think. You tuck your hands under your thighs, turn toward the wall, and try to imagine a summer breeze instead of this January gale. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, you drift. Your dreams are slow and foggy tonight. No visions, no omens, just vague shapes behind a screen of frost. You think about the fire, the dogs, the layered curtains, the wool, the warmth stolen from others. Because in the Middle Ages, staying warm wasn't just a matter of comfort. It was an act of privilege. The poor huddled in barns, in doorways, in stables with the livestock. But you're in a bed the size of a rowboat, inside a room the size of a chapel. You have layers, you have coals, you have silence. For now, you shift once more. The mattress sighs beneath you. Your valet rolls over and mumbles something about Saint-Blé. The candle dims, the fire whispers, your body gives in. And finally, you sleep. The next night, you settle into the bed more slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because you know what's coming. Not dreams, not cold, company. Because tonight, like so many nights before, you will not sleep alone. Let's get this out of the way early. Medieval kings weren't afforded much privacy, not even in their most intimate hour. And yes, that includes bedtime. The royal bedroom was not only a space of rest, it was also a stage for politics, loyalty, and strategic proximity. So welcome to the court tradition of the midnight entourage. A better name might be a dozen people standing very close to your pillow and pretending they're not there. Your bed has curtains, yes, but they're often open, and even when closed, they don't block sound. The people standing a few paces away can hear everything, your sighs, your rustling sheets, and if you're unlucky, the sound of your royal stomach disagreeing with the evening's roast pheasant. Tonight, the cast includes the night guard, sitting on a stool in the corner, eyes closed, but one hand on his sword. The bed servant, resting against the wall, whose job it is to adjust your covers should you roll too far left. The valet, drowsing in a padded chair, waiting for your whispered request for water, parchment, or a wool sock. And maybe, depending on the night, the confessor, dozing upright after you mumbled a sleepy admission about stealing a fig from the larder. Each of them with a reason to be there. Each of them absolutely convinced they're being discreet, and none of them truly silent. You roll over. The straw in the mattress shifts with a dry crunch. You hear someone cough quietly and then try to pretend they didn't. You try to ignore it. You try to sink back into sleep. But there's something about sharing space with people who are trying very hard not to disturb you that makes every movement awkward. It's like sleeping in a library where you're the only book allowed to make noise. But that's just the start, because not every visitor is stationary. Some are scheduled, like the herbalist, who arrives at midnight with a satchel of dried leaves, a jug of steeped valerian, and some medieval version of melatonin. The cup is warm and slightly bitter. You sip it while half sitting and try to ignore the chalky aftertaste. Supposedly it calms the nerves. Allegedly. Other visitors? Not so official. You hear the creak of the side door. The latch clicks softly. Footsteps padded in soft slippers. Not hurried. Not stealthy. Just familiar. She enters without being announced. Of course not. She doesn't need to be. She's allowed. The Queen. Or perhaps someone else. We won't speculate too hard. Let's just say, in royal chambers, nighttime visitors weren't always listed in the public record. Sometimes they're companions. Sometimes they're spies. Sometimes they're simply warm. In any case, your bed has room. It always has room. Because royal beds are huge. More platform than mattress. Enough space for 2, 3, or 4, depending on how many political marriages you've juggled this year. And no one blinks at this. Because in the medieval world, co-sleeping is a statement of trust, of alliance, of preference. There are records of kings sleeping beside their favored knights. Not sexually, necessarily, but politically, symbolically. You share my bed, therefore you share my confidence. It's hard to hide a dagger under a pillow when someone's lying beside you, which is why some kings insisted on it. If they trusted you enough to sleep next to you, you were as close to power as one could get. And yes, there were cases where that trust was broken. Kings murdered in their sleep by those very companions. One infamous case, King Edmund I, stabbed in his own chamber after letting an enemy-turned servant too close. So when you lie there, half asleep, listening to the breathing of the figure beside you, you wonder, what kind of night will this be? A night of trust or of betrayal? But you're too tired to care. You close your eyes again. It's not just humans who share your rest. Let's not forget the animals. Yes, royalty kept animals in the bedroom, not just pets, but warmth providers. Little dogs curled near your feet, cats in corners to keep mice away, even birds in cages by the window chirping softly in the dark. They weren't ornaments, they were utilities, and they all had names. Titles, even. One French king had a dog named Monseigneur Poupon, an official bed companion who once bit a bishop and was pardoned by royal decree. Because, of course, royal pets couldn't be punished like common beasts. They were part of the inner circle. They knew your snores, they knew your moods, they knew which servants to growl at and which ones to lick affectionately. And more than once, they were the only witnesses to royal murmurs no one else should hear. Historians still argue about how full these rooms really were. Some say the idea of packed bedrooms is exaggerated, an invention of dramatic retellings. Others insist it was standard practice, citing endless inventories listing stools, pillows, chamber pots, and benches in what was supposedly a private space. You want the truth? Look around you. You hear soft footsteps, the rustle of pages from a scribe writing near the hearth, the shifting of armor as a guard turns. You are surrounded, and yet completely alone. Eventually, the whispering dies. The lights dim. Someone slips out the way they came. Your bed creaks one final time as you shift onto your back. You stare into the canopy above, tracing the embroidered lilies stitched into the fabric. The warmth is real now. Body heat, fur blankets, heavy velvet curtains drawn tight. You are safe, for now. So you let go, you close your eyes, and sleep takes you, right there in the middle of the noise, like a king. Tonight, you're restless. Not because the bed is less comfortable. It isn't. The goose feather mattress is still soft in all the right places. The sheets smell faintly of clove and lavender, and the warming pan did its job admirably. Number, you're restless because of what's missing. Tonight, for once, the chamber is empty. No attendants, no guards, no coughing scribes, no rustling pages. The door has been barred from the inside, and your bed curtains are drawn. You asked for solitude, demanded it actually. After all, even kings are allowed a night alone. But now, lying in the quiet, you're not so sure. Because in the stillness, you hear everything, every gust of wind that presses against the shuttered windows, every crack of timber, every shifting shadow, and then there's the heartbeat, your own, too loud, too present, as if your chest is trying to remind you that being king doesn't mean being safe. Not even here, especially not here. This brings us to a less romantic truth about medieval royal sleep. It was often haunted by fear. Let's be clear. Kings were targets, always. Assassins, rivals, betrayed cousins with armies. Not to mention the occasional angry noble with a grudge and a dagger hidden in his boot. You don't sleep lightly when your enemies might be standing just outside the door. Or worse, already inside the room. So tonight, let's explore the security rituals of royal sleep. Because while your bed may be luxurious, it is never without risk. First, the door. The average royal bedroom door wasn't just closed, it was secured with a system of bars and bolts. Heavy wooden beams slid across the inside, requiring 2 strong men to set in place. The goal? Prevent anyone from entering or exiting. More than one king has died not from an outside assassin, but from fire with no way to escape. Then come the hidden weapons. Not on the wall where they'd be obvious, but within reach. A short sword beneath the mattress, a dagger inside the nightstand drawer, a belt knife tucked into the lining of your robe. You sleep inches from metal because it makes you feel almost safe. Almost. And then there's the chamber layout itself. Your bed is placed away from the door, never directly in line with it. Too vulnerable. Anyone bursting in would have to circle around furniture, rugs, and perhaps a tipped-over stool or two. Yes, that's intentional. A built-in obstacle course. Even the tapestries serve a purpose. Not just decoration, sound dampeners. So if someone does sneak in, you'll hear the faintest rustle. Or so you hope. Some kings went further. Secret exits, hidden doors behind wardrobes, tunnels beneath floorboards, passages that led to the guard tower or chapel. Henry I of England had a bedchamber with a false panel that opened into a service corridor. Philip II of France reportedly had a trap door beneath his hearth, leading to a spiral stair. Whether these were used for escape, spying, or late-night snacks is anyone's guess. Historians are still debating how common these features were. Some claim they were symbolic, meant to exist more than they actually did. Others insist we underestimate just how paranoid royalty could be. And really, wouldn't you be paranoid? Which brings us to the next layer. Magic. Yes, magic. Because when bolts and blades fail, some kings turn to spells, talismans, and superstitions. Tiny charms sewn into the mattress, crosses drawn in chalk on the headboard, bottles of holy water hidden beneath the bed frame. One king of Aragon reportedly slept with a consecrated wafer under his pillow. Another kept a dried frog in a pouch around his neck to ward off night spirits. You laugh, until you wake to a shadow you can't explain. Then you clutch that frog very tightly. Even priests indulged in such measures. They called them protective blessings. Everyone else called them sleep insurance. But even with every precaution, the fear remains. Because the real threat doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it lives in your head. Medieval kings were plagued by nightmares. Chroniclers describe vivid dreams filled with flames, serpents, drowning, betrayal. Dreams weren't brushed off as nonsense. They were seen as omens. A bad dream could delay a battle, halt a journey, send a monarch into fasting or penance for days. There are royal diaries filled with passages like, "I dreamt of red crows. I will not travel tomorrow. The moon was bleeding," a sign to distrust those who smile. It's not just superstition, it's policy. And so, every night, kings did not just lie down to rest. They prepared. Prayer before bed, holy relics beside the pillow, confession just in case they died in sleep. A clean conscience, if they could manage it. It was called the nightly reckoning. Because who knew if you'd wake up? You're beginning to understand now, aren't you? Why your muscles are tense under the velvet covers. Why you listen harder with every groan of timber. Why your fingers keep drifting to the dagger at your hip even though you're supposed to be asleep. Because being king isn't peaceful. It's being the eye of a storm that never stops spinning. You shift again. The sheets rustle. In the silence, you hear it. A tap, just one. Maybe nothing. But your heart speeds up. You sit up slowly. Your hand moves under the pillow, and you remember. No one's supposed to be here tonight. It turns out to be nothing. A shutter bumping loose in the wind. But for a moment, you imagined everything. An assassin, a ghost, a jealous cousin. You lie back down, slowly, carefully. You whisper a short prayer to Saint Cuthbert, patron of safe sleep. And finally, your body begins to surrender. Not because you feel safe, but because you're too tired to stay afraid. Tomorrow, the room will be full again. The bed remade, the guards returned, the politics resumed. But tonight, it's just you. Just you. The dark, the wind, the long, watchful silence, and the creeping understanding that no matter how thick the walls or how warm the blankets, a king sleeps light. The morning comes slowly, creeping into the chamber like a thief. Quiet, pale, unwelcome. You've slept, but only barely. Dreams clung to your shoulders like wet wool. You remember a stairwell, a woman without a face, a table set for 100, and you, alone. You blink. The fire's dead, the room's gray. The wind has stopped, but the silence left in its place feels heavier. Then you hear it. Voices in the hallway. And just like that, the solitude ends. Your chamberlain knocks, the door creaks open, and the morning parade resumes. Linens, robes, breakfast, news, the usual. But something's different today, because today your body aches. This isn't just the usual stiffness of royal sleep, the sore shoulder from the lumpy corner of the mattress, or the awkward sprawl caused by the dog hogging the foot of the bed. Number this ache is deeper. Your back complains. Your knees protest. And the mattress feels harder, flatter than usual. Because you slept in a castle. But not all royal sleep happens in royal comfort. Today, you remember the nights when there was no canopy, no silk, no fire. Today, we talk about sleeping while traveling. It's easy to think kings spent their entire lives in one palace, one bed, one familiar set of sheets. But that's far from true. Medieval monarchs were constantly on the move. They weren't just rulers. They were symbols, and symbols had to be seen. So the royal household moved like a slow, lumbering beast across the countryside. Between palaces, from abbey to fortress, from city to hunting lodge. And when it did, so did the bed. Yes, the bed. Kings didn't leave sleep to chance. They brought their bed with them. Not the whole frame, mind you, that would be madness. But the essentials, the mattress, the feather bolsters, the linens, the curtains, the embroidered pillows, all of it packed, folded, crated, and carried on a train of carts. This mobile collection of slumber luxury was called the bedchamber suite. It included the royal mattress, aired and beaten daily, sheets washed in rose water or vinegar, pillows labeled for proper arrangement, a folding bed frame, sometimes made of collapsible oak or iron, and of course, the bed tester, a fancy word for the canopy top. Wherever the king went, the illusion of home followed. But of course, it was just that, an illusion. Because sleeping on the road meant compromising. The room might be a drafty monastery cell, a cold tower in a minor noble's keep, or a hastily prepared guest room in a rural hall where pigs had lived last winter. The fire might be too small, the bed too close to the hearth, or worse, too far from it. You might be surrounded by strangers, new guards, unknown servants, or over-eager hosts who keep sneaking back in with "One more question, Your Majesty." And then there were the sounds. New walls meant new echoes. You couldn't trust the way footsteps landed, or how the wind groaned through different eaves. In some places, the creak of a board could send your heart racing, because you didn't know which creaks meant age and which meant intent. Even the bed bugs traveled with you. Yes, royal or not, you weren't immune to the realities of medieval hygiene. The mattress was beaten and aired daily, but no amount of lavender sachets could guarantee comfort. Some kings used bed drapes dipped in vinegar to repel insects. Others wore soft leather gloves to bed, not for warmth, but to avoid bites on royal hands. One chronicler noted, "His Majesty woke with 3 red marks on the cheek and demanded that the steward be flogged for his neglect," which seems extreme until you realize those marks would be visible at court. And kings do not show signs of vulnerability. Even itching was political, and yet despite it all, kings kept moving, because travel was power. To sleep in someone else's hall was to remind them who ruled. To spend the night in a troubled region was to calm it. To rest in a rebellious town was to say, "I am not afraid." But of course, you were. Because every journey risked ambush, poison, or treachery. Which is why the traveling bedchamber also came with extra guards, testing servants and, yes, food tasters, even for the evening stew. And the king, he went to bed wondering if the stew had been stirred one too many times. Some nights, you didn't even get the full suite. Imagine, you've ridden 12 hours across mud-caked roads. Your robes are wet, your limbs ache. You arrive late at a manor with a hole in the roof and a noble who offers you half of his best goose. They rush to prepare the chamber. The mattress is stuffed with old straw. The sheets smell like smoke, and the pillow is suspiciously damp. You try to keep your composure. You try to remember the proper etiquette. You try not to cry, and then you lie down, in full regalia, just to avoid touching the linen. You pray silently to St. Nicholas for mercy, and you sleep with one eye open. Historians debate just how miserable these travel nights were. Some say kings had elaborate comforts, even on the road. Others argue most castles outside of major cities were barely furnished, and any royal sleep away from home was a logistical nightmare. Either way, the records don't lie. There are entries about kings waking in pain, about requests for fresh bedding without delay, about rooms that had to be re-limed because the walls were offensive to the nose. The truth? A king's bed was never just a bed. It was a statement, a risk, a burden, and a reminder that even the most powerful man in the land sometimes had to sleep on a mattress that smelled faintly of onions. Tonight, though, you're home again. The feather mattress welcomes you back. The sheets are crisp. The fire burns low. and yet you still ache. Because royal travel wears you down in ways no velvet can mend. You lie back, close your eyes, and in your dreams, you're always on the road, always searching for comfort that moves as fast as your crown. It's late now, later than usual. The castle is quiet, but not silent. Somewhere far below, a door groans shut. A distant footstep echoes through a hall, and beyond the walls, the wind has picked up again, brushing against the battlements like a slow drum roll. You're in bed, the curtains drawn. You've had your wine, your fire crackles low, but you're still awake. Because tonight, sleep feels like a stranger. It happens sometimes. Even kings suffer from it. Tonight we speak of a royal problem older than most kingdoms. Insomnia. You'd think kings wouldn't have trouble sleeping. They have the finest mattresses, the softest linens, the quietest chambers. But the truth, power is loud, and it whispers in your ear long after the fire goes out. Let's start with the obvious. Stress. You have a realm to rule, a court to manage, nobles who lie, bishops who scheme, foreign rulers who smile too widely. You lie back and try to quiet your mind, but it won't cooperate. What did the Chancellor really mean with that toast? Did you sign the right decree today? Is the treasury truly as full as the steward claims? And what about your son's strange new interest in alchemy? You count the questions like sheep, but they only multiply. 1, 2, 47. Treason. Of course, medieval medicine had its answers. Trouble sleeping? Must be a disturbance of the humors. Probably too much black bile. Maybe too little phlegm. The solution? A compress of warm milk and crushed poppy seed. A clove of garlic tucked beneath the tongue. Reading psalms until your eyes give out. Some physicians recommended sleeping with one foot slightly elevated to drain excessive thought. Others swore by dream stones, smooth pebbles placed under the pillow to encourage peaceful visions. You've tried all of them. Tonight you're using the lavender sachet. Again, it smells like dust and longing. You toss. You turn. The feather mattress shifts like a boat in shallow water. And then comes the worst part. The sounds. When you can't sleep, everything becomes a sound. The creak of the canopy frame, the shuffle of a rat in the rafters, the flutter of a moth against the candle glass, the hum of wind through the arrow slits. Each one becomes an accusation, a reminder that you are awake and alone. Except you're not alone. Remember the guards, the servants, the dog curled at the foot of the bed. You hear their breathing, soft and steady. You envy it. You wonder how they can sleep while you carry the weight of a kingdom on your sternum. Some kings dealt with this in strange ways. Henry IV of England ordered his chamber orchestra to play until dawn when he couldn't sleep. Louis IX had a monk sit by his bed and recite biblical genealogy until his eyes closed, and beget, and beget, and beget, until sleep claimed him out of sheer boredom. You consider calling for music tonight, but instead, you get up. Yes, you rise. It's a scandalous thing for a king to leave his bed at night. It unnerves the staff, disorients the guards, raises questions in the morning, but you don't care. You wrap a cloak around your nightshirt, step into your slippers, light a small lamp, and you walk. Not far, just to the chapel. The stone floor is freezing, the air smells of wax and cold incense. You kneel before the altar. Not out of piety tonight, but out of weariness. You mutter a few words. Not quite a prayer, more like a complaint. If I must rule during the day, can I at least sleep at night? No answer, of course. You return to your chamber. The fire is lower now. The dog lifts its head, thumps its tail once. The guards blink, surprised. You ignore them, back to bed, back beneath the sheets, back into the uncertain dark. You lie there again, eyes open, thoughts racing. The ceiling above offers no peace, and so you begin to count. Not sheep, but battles. Not dreams, but decrees. Not comforts, but consequences. This is insomnia for a king. Not the insomnia of noise or light, but of burden. You rule, and therefore you worry. Every enemy is somewhere out there, still awake. Every friend could yet become a threat. You're too tired to think, and too responsible to rest. Historians rarely write about this part. They talk of treaties, taxes, births, and deaths, but rarely the nights in between. The long hours when kings lie awake, staring into darkness, wondering if their crown will still be theirs come morning. They don't mention the cold sweat, the old pain in the shoulder, the echo of a voice that said something sly at dinner. But they should, because kings are people, and people lose sleep. Even if their bed is made of gold and down, even if their canopy is stitched with lions, even if they command armies, they still lie awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "Please, just let me drift." And finally, your body begins to give in. Not to comfort, not to ease, just to exhaustion. Your thoughts blur, the weight on your chest lessens, the mattress stops creaking, the wind outside becomes a hush, not a howl. You turn to one side, you sigh, and eventually, finally, you sleep. Not like a king, but like a man who needs to. You wake slowly, not in panic this time, not with cold creeping down your spine or a whisper of some forgotten threat. Just softly. There's a glow behind the curtains. Morning, muted by fabric and frost. Your limbs ache, but in a good way, like they finally got the rest they begged for. You stay still for a moment. It's quiet, and you realize you've survived another night. So, let's talk about why that matters. Because in the Middle Ages, sleep wasn't just about rest. It wasn't just about dreams. It was a gamble. And kings, more than anyone, knew how dangerous sleep could be. Today, we talk about sickness. Not the dramatic kind, not battlefield wounds or plague-ravaged cities. We mean the quiet illnesses, the invisible ones, the ones that arrive at night, steal your warmth, and leave you colder than a dagger's edge. Tonight's story is about royal sleep and the creeping hand of disease. See, for all their power, kings were far from invincible. And the bedchamber? It was the front line of their downfall. So many medieval deaths began in sleep. One cough, one chill, one fever that started quietly and refused to break. Because medicine then, let's just say it was more guesswork than science. You lie down with a stomachache and wake up with priests at your side. Or worse, you don't wake up at all. There's a phrase in the Chronicles that appears too often. Retired to bed unwell, did not rise again. That's it. That's the summary. A king with 20 years of rule, reduced to a line about bedtime. So how did kings try to avoid that fate? The answer: precaution, obsession, ritual. Your chamber is a fortress, not just against assassins, but against air itself. Because medieval physicians feared air more than anything. They called it miasma, bad air, foul vapor, invisible sickness. They believed it slipped in through cracks and curtains, that it hovered over marshes and seeped from unwashed bodies. So your room must be pure. Rose petals on the floor, basil in a bowl beside the bed, vinegar-soaked cloths hung over windows. The smell is intense, a medieval cocktail of paranoia and perfume. You breathe it in anyway, because it might help. Your bedding is washed constantly, boiled, dried in sunlight, beaten for fleas, lice, and worse. the servants who make your bed. Rotated weekly, checked for signs of sickness, and if they cough, they're gone before nightfall, because one sneeze could become an epidemic. And kings do not die like common men. They die publicly. Still, the truth lingers. Beds carry disease. The warmth, the stillness, the shared breath. Even the pillows are suspicious. There are records of kings ordering new bedding after every illness, just in case their feather held memory of the fever. And physicians were no help. Some recommended sleeping with garlic cloves in each ear. Others said you should hang a dead mole above your bed. Yes, a mole, preferably recently deceased. You tried it once. The smell was memorable. And no, you didn't sleep well. Some monarchs became obsessive. They refused to sleep in the same room twice. They burned bedding after a fever. One English king had over 60 sets of sheets, rotated daily, never reused. Another ordered a separate bed for each day of the week, labeled, scented, and blessed. Did it help? Maybe. Or maybe it just made them feel less powerless. Because illness didn't wait for invitations. It crept in like a shadow, and once it had you, sleep became a threat. Close your eyes too long, and you might not open them again. So kings became light sleepers, paranoid dreamers. They jolted awake at strange aches. They whispered for herbal draughts in the dark, and every morning they woke alive. It felt a little like victory. You feel it, don't you? That strange intimacy with the bed. Not as comfort, but as a witness. It's seen you healthy and weak, triumphant and shivering. It's held your body when no one else could. And it knows, more than anyone, that kings are not gods. They cough, they sweat, they die. So you rise slowly, you stretch, you breathe in that familiar mix of rosemary, linen, and smoke. You mutter a brief thanks. Not to the saints, to the bed. For one more night, one more morning. Because being king means many things, but today, it means this. You lived. The morning stretches thin and pale across your chamber as servants rush to dress you, bowing and murmuring their usual formalities. Robes of velvet, slippers of deerskin, a warm basin to wash your face. And through all of it, you feel one thing. Tired. Not groggy, not ill, just drained. Because even after sleep, if you can call it that, you don't feel rested. This isn't just today. It's a pattern, a truth few dare to say aloud. Tonight we talk about something quietly devastating. Why kings never truly rest. You see, for the average peasant, sleep was a necessity. A reward after labor. A collapse into straw and exhaustion. It was crude, uncomfortable, and often interrupted, but it meant something. It was earned. But for kings, sleep was a performance, and like all performances, it had an audience. It began with the le coucher, the royal bedtime ritual. In some courts, particularly in France and Burgundy, going to bed was an event. A dozen nobles would gather. Ministers, scribes, extended cousins, priests, all watching as you were helped into your night clothes. The fire crackled politely. The chamber smelled of warmed wine and cedar, and then you'd climb into bed, slowly, theatrically, like an actor stepping into a scene. The covers pulled up by hands you didn't know, a priest murmuring Latin, a physician hovering nearby, pretending not to judge your posture. And there you'd lie, waiting for the signal to close your eyes, because the king's sleep was symbolic. If the king rested, the realm was at peace. So you had to look peaceful, even if your mind was a storm. Some monarchs had a public coucher followed by a private coucher, meaning the show was staged once for the court and then repeated again, privately, hours later. In England, it was called the withdrawal. Imagine that. Pretending to go to bed before actually going to bed. No wonder you're exhausted. You've already slept twice, and not at all. And it wasn't just about sleep. Your entire bedroom was curated for display, the tapestries chosen for their political symbols, the bed frame carved with heraldry, the curtains dyed with rare pigments to signify wealth. Even the bed height mattered. Too low, and it suggested humility. Too high, and it required stools. An awkward scramble that didn't fit the image of regal grace. One French king reportedly had a ladder to reach his bed. It was painted gold, carried by servants, titled in court documents as the Ascent. Yes, even climbing into bed was bureaucratic. And in the midst of this ceremonial absurdity, you were expected to sleep, to genuinely find rest beneath the crushing weight of performance, to breathe steadily while being watched, to close your eyes, knowing the room might still hold spies, rivals, or worse, expectation. No one speaks of how hard it is to sleep when the room expects you to be dreaming, or when your dreams might be interpreted by your confessor the next morning. Yes, dreams were recorded. A court scribe once noted that His Majesty murmured of red banners and black smoke in the third hour of the night. Interpretations were drawn. Advisors adjusted schedules, because a bad dream could mean a bad harvest, a delay in war, a shift in alliances. Imagine waking from a nightmare only to find out your entire day's plans have been changed because of it. Your Majesty, we've cancelled the hunt. The stars disapproved of your vision. All you wanted was to stop dreaming about drowning in porridge. It doesn't help that even when the curtains are closed, you're not alone. There are always ears, always eyes. The valet pretending to doze near the hearth. The guards outside the chamber, too close to be ignored. And the servant girl who brings the honeyed milk, who smiles too often and stays too long. You lie in bed and think, how many people are dreaming of me tonight? And how many of them dream of my death? So you toss, you sigh. You wait for the warmth of the mattress to mean something, but it doesn't, not really. Because royal sleep isn't about restoration. It's about representation. Even unconscious, you are performing power. And like all performances, it leaves you weary. Historians love to write about battles, coronations, treaties. But they skip this, the slow, bitter fatigue that gathers behind a monarch's eyes after years of half-sleep and pageantry. The moment in the mirror, each morning, when the king sees not glory, but bags under his eyes, and knows that the crown weighs more at night. You shift under the covers. The fire is low again. The chamber darkens, and the weariness wraps around you, not like a blanket, but like a chain. You close your eyes, not to rest, but because you must. Because even kings are expected to rise on time. There's something you don't tell anyone. Not your confessor, not your steward, not even the physician who checks your pulse every morning with a face like curdled milk. You don't talk about the hour between hours. That strange time just before dawn, when the fire is burned low and the silence turns dense. You're not awake, but you're not sleeping either. You're just waiting. And in that stillness, something ancient stirs, because tonight we explore one of the strangest truths of the medieval night, the two sleeps. See, medieval sleep wasn't like ours. It came in phases. Historians call it segmented sleep, and it was as common as candlelight. People didn't sleep in one long stretch. They slept in two distinct parts. The first sleep began not long after sundown. You'd crawl into bed around 9 or 10 p.m. and drift off. This stretch would last roughly 4 hours. Then, naturally, without alarm clocks or roosters, you'd wake up, not fully, not sharply, just wake, around midnight, maybe 1 a.m., and you'd be awake for an hour, sometimes 2, the in-between hour, the watching hour, and then you'd return to your second sleep, which carried you into dawn. This wasn't strange. It was expected. Monks designed prayer schedules around it. Farmers knew it well. Even royalty, yes, even you, were accustomed to this rhythm. But you never liked it, because in that in-between hour, the castle shifts, the air cools, the walls creak, the torches in the hallway gutter and die, and your mind, no longer dulled by sleep, fills with everything you've tried to forget. What did people do during this waking hour? So many things. Peasants might stoke the fire, check on animals, or whisper to their spouses in the dark. Scholars read or copied texts. Monks recited matins, early morning prayers whispered in cold chapels with breath hanging in the air. And kings. Kings worried. They summoned scribes, wrote secret letters, met with lovers, paced. Some called this hour the hour of truth, because no one wore a crown at 1 a.m. Not really. You were just a man with cold feet and 1,000 regrets. Tonight, your first sleep ended too soon. The dream left you uneasy. You lie in bed, eyes wide, mind racing. Outside, the castle sleeps. But within your chamber, the old questions return. What if they're lying about the harvest numbers? Did your brother really forgive you? Why did that ambassador flinch when you mentioned the northern border? The questions always come in this hour. They have no answers. Only wait. You sit up. The coals in the hearth are glowing gently, pulsing like the last heartbeat of a dying animal. You wrap a shawl over your shoulders. Stand, stretch. The dog doesn't move. He knows this part. You walk barefoot across the stone floor. The chill shoots up your spine, makes you feel real. At your desk, a candle is already prepared. You light it, and now the ritual begins. You open the ledger, the one only you see. It holds the names of debts, of promises, of people you've failed and people you've rewarded for the wrong reasons. You add one more name tonight. You don't say it aloud, but the ink spreads slowly, deliberately. It feels like a confession. Some nights you write letters in this hour, not official ones, private ones, letters that will never be sent. To your father, to your child, to the person you were before the crown found your head. And then you fold the page, place it in the drawer, where it will stay, unread. Because kings don't cry, not when anyone's watching, only in this hour. The church bells toll once. Faintly, the second sleep calls, but you hesitate, because there's something comfortable in this space between sleeps. It's quiet, honest, no courtiers, no demands, no weight of ceremony, just you and your ghosts and the soft creak of a world spinning on without your permission. Historians still argue about whether segmented sleep was a cultural norm or a biological response, but the evidence is there. Letters written at midnight, books penned between first and second rest, court records noting servants delivering wine or warm bread at 2 a.m. You aren't alone in this rhythm. You just feel that way, because royalty is lonely even in the company of 1,000 servants, especially then. You extinguish the candle, return to bed. The mattress, still warm from your absence, welcomes you back like a lover who never left. You pull the covers higher, close your eyes, and you don't expect dreams. Not tonight. Only silence. Only the second sleep. You awaken differently this time. Not startled, not groggy, but uncertain. There's a moment where you're not sure if you're still dreaming. The morning light hasn't pierced the curtains yet. The fire's out, and the world feels muffled, like it's waiting for your permission to begin again. You sit up slowly, eyes adjusting, and realize something rare has happened. You slept through the second sleep, all the way to dawn. No stirrings, no pacing, no ghost hour in between. Just rest. And the strange part is, you don't feel better. You feel vulnerable. Because if sleep is armor, then this much sleep feels like walking into court unclothed. There's a reason kings rarely let themselves fall that deep. Because in medieval belief, sleep left the soul exposed. And today, we explore the most fragile and most feared aspect of royal sleep: dreams, visions, and prophecy. In the Middle Ages, dreams were serious business. They weren't brushed off as random images or subconscious anxieties. They were messages from God, from angels, from devils, from ancestors, from fate itself. To dream was to receive, and when you're a king, everyone wants to know what you received. You've had your share of strange dreams: a bleeding moon, a horse with two heads, a staircase that descends forever. You don't speak of them, not even to your confessor, because in court, a dream is never just a dream. It's a sign, and signs require interpretation, which means opinions, which means politics, which means risk. Still, they ask, "Did your Majesty dream last night? Any celestial messages during your rest? Has God spoken lately in your slumber?" You shrug, smile vaguely, say something about birds and sunshine, but inside, you're still turning over the image from last night. The mountain that crumbled, the child who wouldn't stop screaming, the stranger who handed you a mirror and said, "Look away." What does it mean? You don't know, and you don't want them to know either. Some kings kept dream books, collections of symbols and their supposed meanings. Dreamt of fire? Expect passion or destruction. A wolf? Treachery? A fish? Prosperity? Or rotting undercurrents? One emperor refused to leave his castle for 3 days after dreaming of falling leaves. Another ordered a cathedral built after dreaming of a staircase of gold rising from his bed to heaven. That staircase collapsed in a storm 2 years later. They said it was a warning unheeded. And then there were the dream interpreters, a job title, a profession. These weren't jesters or mystics in cloaks. They were learned men, priests, philosophers, astrologers, who'd read Aristotle and the Book of Daniel and believed that within every dream was a divine whisper. You've summoned a few. They speak in riddles, they hedge, they flatter. Your Majesty's vision of the sea parting suggests a powerful shift in alliances. The serpents in your bed may reflect anxieties regarding the Northern Dukes, or perhaps indigestion. Sometimes you believe them, sometimes you want to believe them. But more often, you wonder if they're just good at saying things that sound true. And then, there are the nightmares, the ones you can't shake, the ones that crawl back in when you close your eyes again. You had one once of your crown melting into your face. You woke with your hands clawing at your head. Another time, you dreamt of being buried alive, only to wake to find the sheets tangled so tightly around your chest you couldn't breathe. You said nothing. But for 3 nights after, you had a guard stand by your bed, just in case the dream decided to try again. In medieval belief, these nightmares weren't just fears, they were assaults by demons, by spirits, by your own guilty conscience. They even had a name, incubi, malevolent beings that crept into bedrooms and sat on your chest, suffocating you slowly. People described waking in terror, paralyzed, unable to move or speak. Today, we'd call it sleep paralysis. But back then, it was a visitation, a spiritual attack. Kings weren't immune. If anything, they were more attractive targets. Power draws darkness like a lantern draws moths. To ward off such threats, you adopted rituals. A cross drawn on the inside of the headboard. A small vial of holy water beside the pillow. 3 prayers whispered with your last waking breath. You don't even know if you believe anymore. But belief isn't required. Only fear. And fear comes easily when your dreams feel more real than your waking life. Historians argue about whether dreams truly influenced royal decisions. Some say dreams were convenient excuses, tools for justifying actions already decided. Others insist that kings were just as haunted, just as superstitious, just as human as the poorest shepherd. You know the answer, because you live it. Every night, when the fire dies and the dreams begin. This morning, you feel their weight still lingering, even with the sun rising, even with your robe draped around your shoulders and the court waiting outside your chamber door. You look into the polished basin, and you see your own eyes staring back, tired, unsure, older than yesterday. You splash cold water on your face. You take a breath, and you remind yourself, dreams aren't real, even when they feel like prophecies. Still, you avoid mirrors for the rest of the day, just in case that stranger from the dream returns. The sky outside your window darkens once more. Clouds drift like bruises across the horizon, and torches flicker to life along the parapets. Another day gone. Another night approaching, and despite everything, despite the cold baths, the herbal drafts, the quiet prayers murmured into your pillow, there's a dull throb behind your eyes. Because you already know, you won't sleep easily tonight. Not because of fear, not even because of dreams, but because tonight there's noise. And tonight's tale is about something no medieval king could escape. No matter how thick the walls or how rich the tapestries, the unbearable sounds of the medieval night, it starts before you even lie down. The creaking, the groaning, the clattering of servants clearing dishes somewhere far down the hall. The echo of footsteps that seem to multiply with every corner turned. You try to breathe through it. You remind yourself, this is your castle, your court. And still, you hear everything. Because even in a stone fortress, silence is a myth. Let's begin with the architecture. Your chamber is large, grand even. High ceilings, wide hearth, walls of carved stone. But that grandeur comes at a cost. Echoes. Every cough from a nearby corridor seems to bounce around your walls for hours. Even the softest step from the guard outside your door clicks like a hammer. And heaven help you if a rat decides to explore the rafters again. There was one last winter that scurried across your chamber ceiling like a one-rat army. Then there are the animals. Not just the dog curled at the end of your bed, who snores like a small windstorm, but the castle's many resident beasts, the falcons in the mews, shrieking in their sleep, the horses in the lower stables, whinnying at shadows. The pigs, yes, pigs, you hosted a feast last week, grunting from the cellar where they've been temporarily quartered. One night, you woke to what sounded like a demon growling under your bed. It was a goat. No one knows how it got there. You didn't ask. And then there are the humans, the guards whispering gossip by torchlight, the servant who forgets she's not supposed to hum while sweeping, the advisor who walks like he's chasing thunder. You could banish them all, but then you'd be alone. And somehow that's worse. Don't forget the furniture. Your bed frame, a masterpiece of carved oak, creaks every time you breathe. The canopy sways with the draft, tapping gently against its own hooks. The wardrobe clicks in the wind like it's trying to form words. And the fire, Oh, the fire. It crackles, it hisses, it spits. One ember leaps free and lands on the hearthstone, glowing like a tiny red eye. You stare at it for a long time. Eventually it dies. You don't feel better. In the countryside, sleep is punctuated by nature. Wolves howling in the forest, owls calling to each other from the battlements, the distant, unsettling scream of a fox. Sometimes a storm rolls in. The windows rattle, the rain hammers the roof, and the lightning flashes across your room like a divine accusation. You tell yourself it's just weather, but feels personal. In cities, it's worse. If you're staying at the palace in town, your chamber overlooks the streets. And even at night, the city breathes. Drunken laughter from taverns, wheels clattering over cobblestones. The echo of distant shouting, too far to understand, too close to ignore. And always, always the howling of dogs. Why are there so many dogs? You've tried everything, thick woolen drapes, double doors, a musician in the hall playing soft lute melodies, even the soft gurgle of a fountain installed beside your bed for soothing background harmony. It worked for 2 nights, then a toad got in the pipe. The noise it made was unforgettable, and not in a good way. Some kings developed night rituals just to deal with noise. Henry III of Castile stuffed his ears with raw cotton dipped in honey. Louis XII slept with a live dove in his chamber, believing its cooing would cancel out other sounds. One emperor employed a servant whose only job was to shush other servants. You're considering it. You've already started keeping a polished stick near the bed to knock against the wall when the guards get too loud. They think it's a secret signal. Let them. Historians rarely mention how loud medieval nights were. They talk of candle-lit halls and velvet-lined beds, but never the clamor beneath it all. Never the reality of sleeping in stone boxes with poor insulation and echo chambers for ceilings. Never the simple fact that quiet was a luxury even kings couldn't buy. You lie there, eyes open, listening, waiting. The fire pops again. A rat scurries behind the wall. A guard sneezes. You sigh, because in this life, sleep doesn't come in silence. It comes despite the noise, or not at all. You roll onto your side, tug the blanket higher, whisper a curse at the goat ghost, and hope, just maybe, that tonight's dreams will drown out the racket. You know what they say. A restless king is a dangerous king, but perhaps more dangerous is a king who is never truly alone. Even now, as you settle into bed, the sheets still faintly warm from the heated stone placed beneath them an hour ago, there are eyes nearby, ears, footsteps. Even your dreams have witnesses. Tonight, we peel back the curtain on something rarely discussed in royal biographies, but deeply woven into the medieval night, the bedchamber attendants. You'd think, being king, you would have the privilege of privacy. But no. Not in the Middle Ages. Not in a world where rank and ritual suffocate even the most intimate corners of your life. Because in this era, a king never sleeps alone, and not for the reasons you might hope. Let's start with the valet de chambre. His job, everything. He lays out your bedclothes, fluffs your pillows, tucks in the corners just so. He sleeps in the same room, just outside the curtain, eyes half closed, always listening. He's not just a servant, he's a witness. Someone to swear that yes, your Majesty went to bed promptly. That no, nothing improper occurred during the hours of rest. That yes, the king murmured scripture before sleep. Not treason. You trust him, mostly. But even trust grows heavy when it breathes beside you in the dark. Then there's the groom of the stool, an unfortunate title. Yes, but an important one. Though he doesn't sleep in your chamber, he's there just before and just after. He sees more of your nighttime routine than your own mother ever did. And he too talks quietly, politely, but always with ears open. No royal movement goes unnoticed. No midnight mutter is truly private. In some courts, young pages slept at the foot of the bed, ready to fetch water or carry messages at a moment's notice. Imagine that. A gangly 14-year-old dozing beside your toes while you dream of war, famine, or the time you humiliated yourself at a Venetian banquet. And should you snore, they will know. They may never speak of it, but they'll remember. Oh yes, they'll remember. And let's not forget the physician. He doesn't sleep in your room, but he's close. Always close. He checks on you before bed. Pulse, breath, complexion. He leaves you with a sachet of calming herbs and instructions whispered like bedtime stories. Breathe deeply, Your Majesty. Avoid heavy thoughts. If you see St. Catherine in your dreams, do not follow her this time. You don't know how he knows about the last time. You don't ask. All these people, the valets, the pages, the cupbearer who lingers too long, they are the background noise of your nights. They come and go in soft slippers, with heads bowed and hands always full. And yet their presence is louder than any storm, because they remind you that you are never unobserved. Even your bed isn't really yours. Yes, it was carved by the finest artisans, inlaid with mother of pearl, framed in oak from forests older than your kingdom. But it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the monarchy, to history. Kings before you have slept in it, and kings after you will too. Some have died in it. Some have conceived heirs in it. Some have dreamed of the end of the world, then woken to make it happen. You lie in it now, warm, alone, surrounded. The chamber isn't large, but it feels crowded, with expectation, with whispers, with lives that orbit yours so tightly you forget where your breath ends and theirs begins. Sometimes you pretend to be asleep just to make them leave. It works. Sometimes. You once asked a servant if he ever wished for silence. He looked at you like it was the strangest question in the world. "Silence, sire," he said. "But who would care for you then?" You didn't answer, because that's the rub, isn't it? Care is surveillance, and power, in this age, means never truly closing your door. Historians love to romanticize the medieval royal bedchamber. Tapestries, firelight, perfumed linens. They forget the people, the soft shuffling, the quiet coughing, the polite knock at the worst possible moment. They forget how many nights were spent pretending to sleep while someone watched your chest rise and fall. Not out of love, but duty. You roll onto your back. Exhale. Somewhere behind the curtain, someone stirs. You pretend not to notice. Because tonight, sleep is not a retreat. It is a performance witnessed by too many eyes. You know this night won't be restful. Not because of ghosts, not because of noise, but because of the weight, not the crown, that rests on a velvet pillow tonight, polished and still, but another weight entirely. Responsibility. And tonight, we step into one of the heaviest truths of royal sleep, the burden of tomorrow. You lie in bed, staring up at the dark canopy overhead, embroidered with stars and lions and Latin phrases you no longer pretend to understand. The bed is soft, the room is warm, but your mind, it's pacing the hallway. Because in the morning you must decide something large. And no matter how fluffy the goose feather pillow is, no matter how many herbs your physician slipped into your wine, you can't stop thinking about it. This is the part no one tells you about being king. You don't get to sleep like other men, because each day you rise, you don't just dress yourself. You dress an entire kingdom, in words, in laws, in moods. Your tone at breakfast might shape a war. Your frown at council might shatter a treaty. Even your silence can be interpreted like scripture. So when people say kings live in luxury, they've never tried falling asleep with 5 million souls hanging on their dreams. Tomorrow, for example, you must choose between two men. Both claim the same land. Both have powerful families. Both swear loyalty. One is likely lying, the other is probably also lying. But only one can win. And your decision may shape bloodlines for generations. You wish this was unusual, but it's not. This is every day. And every night before, you lie here rehearsing answers you'll never be sure of. It's like playing chess where the pieces are alive and scream and bleed. And then write angry letters to the Pope. You try not to think of the times you were wrong. You tell yourself they were few, that your advisors gave poor counsel, that the omens were misleading, but the truth follows you into sleep like a shadow sewn to your feet. You remember the wronged widow. You remember the starving town. You remember the ambassador you insulted in Latin, only to learn later he understood Latin perfectly. He smiled. That made it worse. And so, you turn on your side, replaying tomorrow's conversation word for word. It never plays the same way twice. There's something strange about royal insomnia. It doesn't look dramatic. There's no pacing, no monologues. Just a man staring at the ceiling, trying not to weep at the sheer complexity of running a kingdom that doesn't believe in easy decisions. Sometimes you wish for peasant sleep, the kind that arrives after 12 hours in a muddy field, the kind earned through sore muscles and frostbitten fingers, the kind that doesn't worry about treaties or titles or taxes, just whether there'll be bread tomorrow. That sounds simple, and simplicity is a kind of wealth you haven't known in years. You could delegate more. You could let the council handle this latest dispute. But kings who sleep too deeply don't wake up at all, and so you memorize the names, the titles, the family trees. You weigh options like coins. You judge character by glances and dinner etiquette. You whisper to yourself, practicing sentences that will never be spoken aloud. I have heard both sides. In my wisdom, I have decided, let justice be done, though the heavens fall. You try to say it without sarcasm. It's difficult. Historians say medieval kings ruled by divine right. They leave out that it meant being terrified of divine consequences. Make the wrong call, and it's not just political. It's spiritual. If the kingdom suffers, it's your fault. If war breaks out, your soul is on the line. If the weather turns, people look at you like you personally argued with the clouds. So yes, you try to sleep, but sleep avoids kings like taxes avoid nobles. You roll onto your back, the fire's low, the coals pulse red and sleepy. You wonder what kind of king you'll be tomorrow. You wonder if tomorrow is the day the people decide they want a different king altogether. You wonder if you'll be ready. You breathe. You close your eyes. You whisper a decision into the dark, just to hear it spoken. You change it 3 minutes later. Because no matter how long you lie in bed, nothing about ruling gets easier. Just quieter. Tonight, there's a chill in the air that no hearth seems able to beat back. The servants added an extra blanket. The fire burns high and bright. Your nightshirt is thick wool, lined with fur, and yet your skin shivers, not from cold, from memory. Because no matter how many layers you wrap yourself in, nothing protects you from what came before. Tonight, we visit something royal biographies whisper about, but never linger on. The nightmares of battle. The war ended years ago, on paper anyway. The treaty was signed in a smoky tent under neutral banners. The bells rang in every village. The poets composed songs, but inside your chest, the drums haven't stopped. You hear them when it's quiet. You feel them in the bedposts. You dream of them in ways that leave you breathless, jaw clenched, blankets twisted like bindings. No one speaks of what a king sees on the battlefield. They assume you stood on a hill, far from the blood. And sure, you started there, but eventually the battle found you. Steel doesn't care about lineage. Arrows don't pause for crowns. And fear. Fear is democratic. You remember the sounds first. Screaming, not of rage, but of confusion. Like men suddenly dropped into a world where logic no longer applies. Horses shrieking, the wet noise of blade meeting bone, the hiss of flame eating tents, and the silence that followed, the sudden aching quiet of thousands no longer breathing. They told you it was a glorious victory, but glory has a smell, and it stinks. You remember stepping over bodies, some with faces you knew. You remember slipping in something you never looked at too closely. You remember one young soldier crying out, "Mother," long after he should have been dead. He looked at you. You looked away. And that moment, that instant of not doing something, haunts you more than anything you did. After the war, you were celebrated. Laurel wreaths, feasts, paintings of you on horseback, sword raised, triumphant. No one painted the mud. No one painted the eyes. They never do. Now, in the middle of the night, they come back. Not every night, but often enough. You close your eyes, and suddenly the torchlight flickers like fire arrows. The crackling logs sound like bones. A servant drops a plate and you flinch. Just slightly, but enough to remember. And when you finally do sleep, you dream not of victory, but of all the lives your decisions cost. One knight once told you war is like a second marriage. Easy to enter, impossible to leave with your dignity intact. He died in your third campaign. You still remember his voice. Not what he said, just the sound, like gravel, like home. People think kings are shielded from consequence, but you know better. Because when the realm celebrates peace, they cheer what you endured, but never what you carry. Some nights, you wake with your sword drawn. You don't remember grabbing it. You don't remember rising from bed. But there it is, cold and real in your grip. You breathe, you wait, you lower it. The dog looks up, unimpressed. You mutter an apology. You're not sure if it's for the dog or for the ghost still standing in the corner. Your physician calls them fever dreams. He offers tinctures, opiates, warm wine. Sometimes you take them. They help. Sometimes. But they don't change the dreams. They just blur the edges, like fog on a battlefield. You still hear the screams. They're just quieter. Historians never write this. They record the victories, the dates, the names of the fallen like entries in a ledger. They don't write about kings crying in the dark, or about the nightmares that creep through castle corridors like assassins with muddy boots. But those are the real histories, not carved in stone, etched in sleep. You lie back. You try again. You tell yourself the war is over, that you are safe, that your people sleep under your protection. But some part of you still stands on that battlefield, eyes wide, heart pounding, waiting for the trumpet, praying it doesn't sound. Tonight, sleep comes easier. Not because you're less troubled, not because the fire crackles more softly or the bed feels kinder, but because of habit. because exhaustion eventually overrules memory, and even kings can only carry so much wakefulness before their bodies shut down in protest. You drift, not deeply, not soundly, but just enough. And as you slip into the velvet dark between dreams, something familiar enters with you. A smell, a sound, a feeling from long ago. Tonight, your mind wanders back to a comfort you almost forgot. Sleeping like a child. Not just a child, you as a child. Before the crown, before the tutors and the titles and the 1,000 unwinnable decisions. Before your sleep was monitored by valleys and interrupted by court whispers. Back when night meant only one thing. Rest. You remember it clearly, though no one ever asks you to. The room wasn't large. It had a sloped wooden ceiling and shutters that barely held out the wind. The mattress was stuffed with straw, real straw, not goose feathers, and squeaked every time you turned. The hearth was small if it was lit at all, but it was yours. And in that tiny chamber, beneath a blanket your nursemaid had patched a dozen times, you felt safe. You slept without fear, without noise, without expectation. The world was quieter then. You didn't understand the politics in the hallways. You didn't care who owed your father what in taxes. You knew only bedtime, the song your nurse would hum, off-key but sweet. The scratchy feel of your woolen nightshirt, the way the window pane fogged when you breathed too close, and that moment just before drifting off, when everything felt warm and whole. You long for that again, not the room, not the innocence, but the freedom of unconsciousness, the ability to close your eyes without calculation, to dream without dread, to wake without responsibility. You remember a storm one night, rain pounding so loud it sounded like a battle above the roof. You were terrified. You ran to your nursemaid's cot and buried your face in the crook of her arm. She didn't shush you, didn't scold you. She just laid a hand on your back and whispered, "It's just the sky stretching." You believed her. And that night, you slept better than any other night in your life. Because someone else carried the worry for you. You don't remember the last time someone did that. Maybe it was decades ago. Maybe never. But it's a beautiful fiction to revisit now, in the quiet dark. You imagine her voice. You imagine her hand. You imagine the sky above you stretching. Historians write of royal childhoods as golden. They picture tutors and pony rides and miniature thrones. They forget the loneliness, the crushing weight of knowing your life wasn't your own. The pressure that begins before you even understand what a kingdom is. They forget that kings are born with crowns hovering over cribs, that sleep becomes strategy before it becomes solace. And yet tonight, just for a moment, you remember what it felt like to rest without pretense, to curl into warmth without wondering who's watching, to dream not of wars or treaties, but of rivers and birds and games in sunlit fields. Maybe that child is still inside you, buried, yes, tired, but not gone. Maybe that part of you waits patiently every night just behind the curtain of wakefulness, hoping you'll visit, even briefly. And tonight you do. You slip through the years. You lie down on straw instead of silk. You listen to a lullaby no one else remembers. You let the rain sound like stretching sky, and for once, you do not dream of kingship. You dream of sleep itself. They say kings live in castles, but that's only half true. Because really, kings live in schedules, timetables, rituals, every hour measured, every minute accounted for, even sleep must obey the calendar. And tonight, as the bells chime softly from the far tower, echoing into your chamber like a polite threat, you remember. You are overdue for a ritual. Tonight's story is about the strange and sacred rhythms of the royal body, midnight medicine, and the science of sleep. In your world, health is politics. And sleep? Sleep is an affair of state. A king's dreams can be interpreted. His rest, or lack of it, becomes gossip, prophecy, or treason depending on who's listening. So naturally, there are people whose job it is to keep you sleeping like a good monarch should. Or at least to try. Enter the physicians. Not one, mind you, several, because no one doctor can truly understand the complexity of your royal constitution. You've had a French herbalist who swore by lavender pillows and leeches, an Italian who whispered spells over your water jug when he thought you weren't listening, a Moorish physician who actually helped, until the court grew suspicious of his foreign methods. Each had theories, each had mixtures, and all of them agreed on one thing. The king must sleep, or risk madness, impotence, rebellion, or gout. Possibly all at once. Your nightly regimen is absurd, and you know it. A small goblet of mulled wine, a handful of dried poppy seeds, a spoonful of syrupy root extract that tastes like roasted ink, 2 cloves beneath your tongue, then prayers, then stretches, then bed. And only then, blessed unconsciousness, if the gods are merciful and the dog doesn't start barking at shadows again. One doctor insisted you sleep with your head facing east. Another said it must be north, to align with your spinal winds. You tried both. Eventually settled for the direction where the morning sun hit you least directly in the face. Another made you eat boiled lettuce at dusk. Said it sedated the humors. You nodded solemnly, ate it for a week, and then, accidentally, fed it to the falcons. They still look offended. The science of sleep in your time is a delightful blend of Greek medicine, church doctrine, and wild guesswork. Too much black bile. You're melancholic. Sleep all day. Too much yellow bile. You're choleric. Can't sleep at all. Too much phlegm. You're damp, lazy, and prone to moaning in your dreams. And blood. Always too much blood. The solution? Bleed you, of course. You've lost enough blood by now to water a small vineyard. You've been prescribed heated bricks at your feet, chamomile-soaked wool caps, warm milk stirred with silver spoons, and once, memorably, a gentle slap to the forehead to remind the body who's in charge. It worked. Once. Then you banned the physician. He now treats sheep in Devon. Some remedies are more ritualistic. A carved charm placed under your pillow, inscribed with nonsense Latin. An amulet tied around your wrist, supposedly made from saint's hair. A glass of holy water infused with ash from the altar candles. The water smelled of wax and guilt. You drank it anyway, because deep down, you'll try anything once. Except the slug poultice. You drew the line at slugs. Historians like to laugh at medieval medicine. They scoff at the herbs and the bleeding and the prayers. But here's what they forget. You didn't have a choice. When sleep leaves you, reason does too. You'd recite the Lord's Prayer backward and howl at the moon if someone promised you'd sleep 8 full hours. And some nights, you almost do. The court watches your health like it's a prophecy. When you sleep well, the kitchen buzzes, the guards whistle, the scribes dare to crack jokes. When you don't, they walk softly. They speak in single syllables, and your cupbearer triple checks your wine for bitterness. You wonder sometimes, does anyone sleep well in this world? Is there one person in this castle, this city, this continent who lies down at dusk and simply rests? Or are you all just pretending? tossing under blankets, swallowing potions, praying for mercy from the gods of slumber. Tonight, you skip the syrup. You don't light the incense. You sit by the fire and listen to the wind moan against the shutters. You stare into the flames, daring them to show you a better cure. They don't, but still. The warmth is real, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough for now. You rise, you undress, you slip beneath the covers. No chants, no powders, no prayers, just breathe, just darkness, just you and the quiet ticking of the body, hoping the clock will be kind tonight. Tonight, there's a different kind of silence, not the peaceful kind, not the sleep-ready hush of rain on shutters or wind in the trees. No, this silence is tense, still, tight, like the entire castle is holding its breath. You feel it in the mattress, in the folds of the curtain, in the way your dog hasn't stirred in over an hour. Something's different tonight, because tonight someone is missing. And that brings us to the next truth of royal slumber. When the queen is not in the bed, you're used to sleeping alone, or so you tell yourself. After all, the royal marriage isn't exactly built on intimacy. It's a structure of duty, of alliances and treaties and airs and appearances. Love is optional. Sleep is political. But still, when she's here, the room feels different. Her breathing evens yours out. Her scent, rosewater, linen, something sharper, settles the shadows. She doesn't talk much. She doesn't need to. Just being there balances the weight. Tonight she's away, gone to her brother's court to settle a matter of land or blood or insult. You forget which. And her absence feels like a hole in the wall, a draft where there shouldn't be one, a pressure in your chest that isn't pain, but isn't comfortable either. It's not romance. Not really. But familiarity can be its own form of comfort. You've spent years learning how she folds her hands in sleep, how she sighs when turning onto her left, how she mumbles prayers into the pillow, half Latin, half complaint. You miss that. More than you'd ever admit aloud. Her side of the bed is cold. You ran your hand across it earlier, as if you could warm it by memory, but linen has no loyalty. It clings to heat, not titles. And tonight, it clings to nothing. You remember the first night you shared this bed. Neither of you spoke. She lay like a statue. You lay like a thief. And between you, a distance greater than any battlefield. But in time, things changed. Not with passion, not with fire, with habits, with a shared rhythm, with quiet. There were nights you woke to find her watching the ceiling, same as you. Nights when she asked questions like, do you think God sleeps? Do birds dream? What happens if both of us die in our sleep? You never had good answers. But sometimes she didn't need one. She just needed someone awake. Now that she's gone, the dreams are worse. Stranger. You had one last night where she was walking into the sea, holding a crown in both hands. You couldn't follow. Your legs wouldn't move. You just stood there, shouting her name. A name you rarely use out loud. You woke sweating, didn't mention it, but you haven't stopped thinking about it since. Some kings kept separate chambers, some even separate palaces. You always found that strange. Not because you loved her, but because you trusted her to share the dark. And that's no small thing. Historians rarely ask where the queen slept. They trace her lineage, her wardrobe, her fertility. They forget she was also a person who had bad dreams, who needed a drink of water at midnight, who turned toward or away from you based on the news of the day. She wasn't just a consort. She was a witness to your most vulnerable hours, and tonight that witness is gone. You consider moving to a guest chamber to escape the echo of her absence, but that would mean explaining to the servants, to the guards, to the gossip vultures who orbit your life like flies at a feast. So you stay, because kings don't flee their beds, even when they're haunted by emptiness. You reach across the bed again, still cold, still empty. You close your eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, you imagine she's there, that the blanket rises and falls beside you, that the perfume hasn't faded, that the silence is full again. It isn't. But you pretend, because sometimes pretending is the only way to sleep. Tonight, the walls feel closer than usual. The shadows hang heavier. Even the fire seems to burn quieter, as if not to disturb something lurking just beyond the edge of understanding. You've woken 3 times already, not from noise, not from dreams, but from the feeling, that ancient, bone-deep awareness. You're being watched. Tonight's tale drifts into the strangest realm of royal rest. Spies, secrets, and the sleepless king. You've known for years that nothing is truly private. Not your meals, not your prayers, certainly not your sleep. Because when you rule a kingdom, there's always someone who wants to know what you dream about. And sometimes, that someone is very close indeed. It starts with the servants. They move like ghosts, quiet, professional, ever present. But they listen. Always. And some are paid to remember what they hear. Who pays them? Sometimes a rival lord, sometimes a foreign court, sometimes your own brother. You learned that the hard way, and you've never forgotten it. Then there's the cupbearer, trusted, loyal, smiles too much. You had a dream once that he stood over your bed with a knife made of ice. You woke in a sweat and laughed it off. Until 3 nights later, he accidentally brought you the wrong cup. You watched his hands shake. You didn't drink. He never made that mistake again. He also never met your eyes after that. Even the bed might be a trap. Years ago, your steward discovered a hollow beam in the frame, enough space to hide a rolled scroll, or a thin blade. You never learned who put it there. You burned the bed and ordered a new one. Still, sometimes you wonder if that solved the problem, or just moved it. There are places in the castle you avoid after dusk. The gallery with too many statues. The south corridor where the floorboards shift, but no one walks. The priest's chamber, where you once found a folded note tucked beneath your pillow. Even a king must blink sometime. You never found out who wrote it. You changed your entire guard that week. Twice. Tonight, as you lie still in the half-dark, you hear something. Not a footstep, not a door, just a pause. A breath that doesn't belong to you. You hold your own, wait, count. Then it's gone. You once had a mistress who swore she could hear people's sins in their sleep. She'd sit beside you while you dozed, then tell you in the morning what she'd heard. You mumbled about betrayal, she said once. Your hands twitched like you were reaching for a sword. You dismissed her, but not entirely. Spies don't wear masks or skulk in cloaks. They're the ones who bow just the right way. Ask the perfect casual question. Notice what time your candle goes out. Notice when it doesn't. And what better time to observe a king than when he's most defenseless? You remember the monk who once stayed in your guest quarters? A quiet man who copied scrolls and asked nothing. Until one morning your steward found him missing. He'd left behind a journal filled with strange notes, descriptions of your routine, sketches of your bedchamber, a list of which side you preferred to sleep on. You laughed it off. But for weeks after, you didn't sleep at all. Historians call these years your paranoid period. They say you grew distant, that you built unnecessary walls, both in your castle and in your court. But what they forget is, Kings don't have paranoia. They have preparation. You still leave decoy pillows under the covers some nights. Still change the pattern of your night guards weekly. Still pretend to snore when you think someone's listening. Because the truth is chilling. Sleep is vulnerability. And in a palace, vulnerability is currency. You once had a dream of yourself walking through the halls at night, only to pass a mirror that showed no reflection. You stopped, looked again, and realized you weren't dreaming at all. You were awake, alone, and someone had moved the mirror. You shake your head, try to laugh, but your heart still beats a little faster than it should. You pull the blanket tighter, not for warmth, but for barrier. Thin as it is, it's all you have. Somewhere a door creaks just a little. You stay still. Listen. Count the seconds. The silence returns. But now it knows it's being watched, and you, king of this realm, lie in your grand bed, fighting sleep not because you aren't tired, but because you aren't alone, and haven't been for a long, long time. There's a strange truth about power that no one tells you, a truth that slips in quietly, like damp into the seams of old stone. The more you have, the less you're allowed to feel. Tonight it presses harder than usual, not like a sword to the throat. Number more like a whisper against the soul. And tonight, we step into a chamber you rarely open, even to yourself. Loneliness in a crowded castle. You are never alone. Never. At any given moment, a dozen people could hear you shout. 100 more would answer your call. Servants wait outside. Guards patrol the halls. Your steward, your confessor, your scribe. They all hover like smoke you can't wave away. But inside, it's quiet. Dangerously quiet. Once, you tried explaining it to a courtier. He laughed. What a thing to say. You've the whole kingdom at your feet. And you smiled. Because what else do you do when someone misunderstands you that completely? You could call for company tonight. A musician, a story reader, a warm body. You have that power. But power can't fill the space that grows when the last candle is out, and the fire has turned to embers, and you finally have nothing left to perform. That's when the truth walks in, barefoot, silent, inevitable. It doesn't matter how gilded the bedposts are, how fine the linens, how many symbols of authority are stitched into the canopy. Loneliness finds its way in. It always does. You remember a moment years ago, after a long feast when the guests had gone. The hall was empty except for one flickering torch and your footsteps. You heard them echo, not the sounds of a king, just a man walking without purpose. That night, you didn't sleep, not because of war, not because of ghosts, but because for the first time you realized everyone wants something from you, but no one wants you. That's not self-pity. It's just fact. You are a figure, a symbol, a vessel for power. To most, you are useful. To some, dangerous. To a very rare few, perhaps familiar. But to be known, that is a luxury you traded away when you first wore the crown. The bed creaks slightly as you shift. Not in pain, just in thought. You wonder what you would say if someone asked, honestly, how you're doing. What would that even sound like? Could you speak plainly? Would the words still come out wrapped in ritual? You once had a friend, before the throne. He'd throw rocks at your window when you couldn't sleep. You'd sneak out, run barefoot in the dew, talk about everything and nothing. He drowned at 23. You still dream about his laugh, the kind that shook his whole body. You haven't heard a laugh like that in decades. Tonight, the walls feel closer than usual. The shadows hang heavier. Even the fire seems to burn quieter, as if not to disturb something lurking just beyond the edge of understanding. You've woken 3 times already, not from noise, not from dreams, but from the feeling, that ancient bone-deep awareness. You're being watched. Tonight's tale drifts into the strangest realm of royal rest. Spies, secrets, and the sleepless king. You've known for years that nothing is truly private. Not your meals, not your prayers, certainly not your sleep. Because when you rule a kingdom, there's always someone who wants to know what you dream about. And sometimes that someone is very close indeed. It starts with the servants. They move like ghosts, quiet, professional, ever-present. But they listen, always, and some are paid to remember what they hear. Who pays them? Sometimes a rival lord, sometimes a foreign court, sometimes your own brother. You learned that the hard way, and you've never forgotten it. Then there's the cupbearer. Trusted, loyal, smiles too much. You had a dream once that he stood over your bed with a knife made of ice. You woke in a sweat and laughed it off. Until 3 nights later, he accidentally brought you the wrong cup. You watched his hands shake. You didn't drink. He never made that mistake again. He also never met your eyes after that. Even the bed might be a trap. Years ago, your steward discovered a hollow beam in the frame, enough space to hide a rolled scroll. Or a thin blade. You never learned who put it there. You burned the bed and ordered a new one. Still, sometimes you wonder if that solved the problem, or just moved it. There are places in the castle you avoid after dusk. The gallery with too many statues. The south corridor where the floorboards shift but no one walks. The priest's chamber, where you once found a folded note tucked beneath your pillow. Even a king must blink sometime. You never found out who wrote it. You changed your entire guard that week. Twice. Tonight, as you lie still in the half-dark, you hear something. Not a footstep, not a door. Just a pause. A breath that doesn't belong to you. You hold your own. Wait, count, then it's gone. You once had a mistress who swore she could hear people's sins in their sleep. She'd sit beside you while you dozed, then tell you in the morning what she'd heard. You mumbled about betrayal, she said once. Your hands twitched like you were reaching for a sword. You dismissed her, but not entirely. Spies don't wear masks or skulk in cloaks. They're the ones who bow just the right way. Ask the perfect casual question. Notice what time your candle goes out. Notice when it doesn't. And what better time to observe a king than when he's most defenseless? You remember the monk who once stayed in your guest quarters? A quiet man who copied scrolls and asked nothing. Until one morning, your steward found him missing. He'd left behind a journal filled with strained notes. Descriptions of your routine. Sketches of your bedchamber. A list of which side you preferred to sleep on. You laughed it off. But for weeks after, you didn't sleep at all. Historians call these years your paranoid period. They say you grew distant, that you built unnecessary walls, both in your castle and in your court. But what they forget is, kings don't have paranoia. They have preparation. You still leave decoy pillows under the covers some nights. Still change the pattern of your night guards weekly. Still pretend to snore when you think someone's listening. Because the truth is chilling. Sleep is vulnerability. And in a palace, vulnerability is currency. You once had a dream of yourself walking through the halls at night, only to pass a mirror that showed no reflection. You stopped, looked again, and realized you weren't dreaming at all. You were awake, alone, and someone had moved the mirror. You shake your head, try to laugh, but your heart still beats a little faster than it should. You pull the blanket tighter, not for warmth, but for barrier. Thin as it is, it's all you have. Somewhere, a door creaks, just a little. You stay still, listen, count the seconds. The silence returns, but now it knows it's being watched, and you, king of this realm, lie in your grand bed, fighting sleep not because you aren't tired, but because you aren't alone, and haven't been for a long, long time. There's a strange truth about power that no one tells you, a truth that slips in quietly, like damp into the seams of old stone. The more you have, the less you're allowed to feel. Tonight, it presses harder than usual, not like a sword to the throat. Number more like a whisper against the soul. And tonight, we step into a chamber you rarely open, even to yourself. Loneliness in a crowded castle. You are never alone, never. At any given moment, a dozen people could hear you shout. 100 more would answer your call. Servants wait outside. Guards patrol the halls. Your steward, your confessor, your scribe, they all hover like smoke you can't wave away. But inside, it's quiet. Dangerously quiet. Once, you tried explaining it to a courtier. He laughed. What a thing to say. You've the whole kingdom at your feet. And you smiled. Because what else do you do when someone misunderstands you that completely? You could call for company tonight. A musician, a story reader, a warm body. You have that power. But power can't fill the space that grows when the last candle is out, and the fire has turned to embers, and you finally have nothing left to perform. That's when the truth walks in. Barefoot, silent, inevitable. It doesn't matter how gilded the bedposts are, how fine the linens, how many symbols of authority are stitched into the canopy. Loneliness finds its way in. It always does. You remember a moment, years ago, after a long feast when the guests had gone. The hall was empty except for one flickering torch and your footsteps. You heard them echo. Not the sounds of a king, just a man walking without purpose. That night, you didn't sleep. Not because of war, not because of ghosts, but because for the first time you realized everyone wants something from you. But no one wants you. That's not self-pity. It's just fact. You are a figure, a symbol, a vessel for power. To most, you are useful. To some, dangerous. To a very rare few, perhaps familiar. But to be known, that is a luxury you traded away when you first wore the crown. The bed creaks slightly as you shift. Not in pain, just in thought. You wonder what you would say if someone asked, honestly, how you're doing. What would that even sound like? Could you speak plainly? Would the words still come out wrapped in ritual? You once had a friend, before the throne. He'd throw rocks at your window when you couldn't sleep. You'd sneak out, run barefoot in the dew, talk about everything and nothing. He drowned at 23. You still dream about his laugh, the kind that shook his whole body. You haven't heard a laugh like that in decades. Historians will call you solitary by nature. They'll cite your sparse correspondence, your tendency to eat alone, your fondness for long walks at dusk. They'll never ask why, because they assume kings choose solitude. But you didn't choose it. It was assigned. And so, you lie in bed, list the people who know your name, then cross off the ones who know you. It's a short list. Some nights, it's empty. They say kings can command anything. But you can't command someone to stay without reason. You can't command someone to sit beside you just because the night feels long. You can't order away the ache of being surrounded by people and still aching for connection. So you whisper something. Into the dark, a name, a prayer. A joke no one else would get. Not for anyone to hear. Just to make a sound that belongs only to you. The silence doesn't answer, but it also doesn't take anything away. And in this castle, that's the closest thing to comfort you'll get tonight. The fire has dimmed to a soft red glow, the kind of light that feels like it's breathing with you. The kind that doesn't push the dark away. It just reminds you that it's not all black. You stare into it, letting your thoughts slip loose like threads from a robe. And tonight, one of those threads is faith. Not the kind carved into cathedral stone or sung in Latin by men in robes, but the kind that creeps in during the quietest hours when all else is stripped away. Tonight, you lie with your questions, and the next piece of your story unfolds. Prayers, omens, and the sleep of the God-fearing king. You are not a heretic. Of course not. You've built churches, funded pilgrimages, listened politely to sermons that seemed designed to put the Almighty himself to sleep. But late at night, with no eyes watching and no ears listening, you wonder, is he listening? Does he watch you sleep? Does he care if you do? You've done things, terrible things, some in the name of peace, some in the name of justice, some simply because it was what kings do. The sword doesn't pause for confession, and the crown doesn't come with a conscience. Still, you pray, not because you're certain, but because you're not. You pray for your soul, for your kingdom, for the people who curse your name and still kneel when you pass. You pray for your children, even the ones who look at you with that cautious distance, especially them. You pray for the queen, for her return, for her rest. You pray for the peasant who died because you signed the wrong scroll too fast. You pray for the falcon that never came back. You pray for the man whose name you forgot, the one who bled out whispering it. You pray for the part of yourself that you buried when they crowned you.